Max Verstappen was in the news this week, which is quite difficult for a Formula 1 driver to achieve in January because there's so little going on. But Max was in Morocco for Formula E, where he was at the second race, serving the first part of his 2 days of public service punishment with the FIA, which takes us back to the Brazilian Grand Prix, where he got in trouble for pushing Esteban Ocon after the two collided on track. Now, Alex, we didn't see that much of Verstappen, of course, while he was there, because it wasn't there really for a public appearance. But what did he get up to during what is a frantic Formula E event?
Yeah, so I didn't see anything of him on the day. I did wonder whether he was actually there, but we saw a picture that confirmed he was. So he spent the day in race control, although he wasn't like locked in as you'd imagine, observing the on-track action with the stewards. So he sat next to Antonio Liuzzi, the former Red Bull and Force India F1 driver, and he was there to see the decisions that the stewards made.
And Scott, do you think that Max will take anything away from that experience? It was an incident-packed race, although there were some incidents that we were surprised there were no penalties for. Maybe Max had a say in that. But would you expect him to go back to F1 with any kind of different perspective based on what he's seen?
I think he'd probably be, I don't know if he'd be encouraged by the fact that Jean-Eric Vergne and Lucas di Grassi appeared to get away with being a bit risky, dangerous on the first lap. Feisty, yeah, let's call it feisty, a bit chaotic. But more seriously, I think when you're actually exposed to the processes that stewards go through, especially in a race like that was so hectic, we had first lap shenanigans, we had teammates colliding. I think we had a moment where someone went off track to keep position late in the middle of the race as well. So there's a lot going on, and whether you're a driver or whether it's in a different sport or in any kind of walk of life, really, if you only do things on one side of the coin, you only ever see that. And I think in this situation, when you're actually exposed to the way things work and you sort of get a better understanding and appreciation of how other people operate and why certain decisions get made, what they discuss as well, what the actual procedure is, it's not going to be exactly the same as it is at an F1 race, but he'll have a better appreciation for it. And even if it doesn't make him necessarily change the way he thinks, acts or speaks, because it's Max Verstappen and he is a bit of a wild card, I think deep down he will probably have gained something from it.
Alex, there was some feedback over the weekend, some people inside and outside Formula E complaining about the fact that Verstappen was effectively sent to this other major championship as a punishment. Is there anything justifiable in that, or do people need to see that actually he got sent to Formula E because that's the best place to get a similar experience to F1?
Yeah, it's interesting. There seems to be sort of a disconnect between basically the wording involved. So he was sent there to do the first day of his public service, but he was given that public service as a punishment. So it is a punishment in a way. But a lot of people were like, and Sam Bird mentioned this in the press conference, and they do have a point here, is to say that coming to a Formula E race shouldn't be a punishment, and obviously it wasn't, because in a way, it was a real vote of confidence in the series from the FIA because of the nature of the calendar. It was the first and really the only race that Verstappen could have got to. Like, it's near to Europe. It's at the time of year when, as you said, F1 isn't doing anything, and it just meant that it was of a similar level. It was the same sort of championship, single seaters. You know, it's a big international series, and he would have seen the exact calls that could be made in an F1 race. I think there was it Mexico a few years ago where him and Hamilton were involved in cutting the first corner, and there was there's a big radio argument. Well, that exact thing happened, as you alluded to, Scott, with Sam Bird and Antonio Felix da Costa, and that was investigated by the stewards during the race, and no action was taken. So hopefully he would have seen why they arrived at that conclusion. And I spoke to Audi team principal Alan McNish the day after the race during the rookie test, and he said that for him, it was a brilliant thing for Verstappen to see that, because when he retired from being a racing driver, Manish said, he went and worked as an FIA steward, and he got to see that stewards aren't just making these calls arbitrarily. They don't write the rules; they just enact them. So if you've broken the rule, they have to make a decision based on that. So he thinks it would have been beneficial for Verstappen to see that.
I think Formula E were pretty screwed from the moment Verstappen turned up, really, and it became a public thing, because unfortunately, as Alex said, it was a punishment. He was there as punishment, and the age we live in at the moment, where everyone makes a snap decision and then they declare what their opinion is on the internet within seconds, everyone decided that Max Verstappen was there because Formula E was punishment for him. That's what the connection that people made. People assume that because Verstappen was there for Formula E, the Formula E element of it was the punishment, and then people start making jokes, but then the joke becomes semi-serious, and then it ends up being merged into this really messy situation where they're all saying one thing, and then we're going to end up coming across as massive apologists for saying, well, actually it was for sensible reasons for this and this, because it just looks like we're defending Formula E. The reality is, unfortunately, the soundbite world that we live in now. People made their judgments on Saturday morning or Friday afternoon, whenever it was that we knew Max was there. People made their decision then. Max was there as punishment to watch Formula E, because Formula E is really boring and rubbish, and Formula One's way better, and that's your punishment. And if you misbehave again, we're going to send you to another Formula E race. And unfortunately, that is where Formula E were let down. Like, you can't really do anything about that. So as long as FE and the FAA make it clear what the real reasons were, anyone sensible will know that Max wasn't there as punishment to watch Formula E. He was there to observe how the FAA goes about things, and hopefully that Formula E and the FAA can sort of move past that and just sort of accept that reaction for what it was.
I mean, it was a snapshot into our modern life, wasn't it? It was people seeing one thing, making a snap decision about it, and going, "Oh, I don't like this." But also, he was there. He's going to see a boring Formula E race. Well, it wasn't. That was, I have to say, from race that I've been there, that was the best Formula E race that I've seen. He sort of had it all really, from the first corner to the teammates hitting each other, and it played out very nicely.
Max also says that he got a lot from it, and he sort of found it a constructive thing to do. I'm sure he will say that, especially as his quote was used by the FAA to explain why he was there and what he got from it. But take him at his word, I'm sure he did learn something from it.
I guess one of the other problems was probably that when you hear public service or community service, the jokes where is he going to be picking up litter at the side of the road and that sort of thing. Maybe they could have stuck him on a marshal's post for that early FP1 session that happened just after dawn and it was freezing cold. But do we think, Scott, that maybe would other F1 drivers potentially benefit from seeing the perspective that Max got?
I think so. I mean, I've been to a couple of official events before, just sort of in, when we get random invites sometimes in this job, and sometimes it's not the most fun thing in the world, but you agree to go and spend the day with some marshals or stewards or whatever it is, and you do get a newfound respect for what they know, and also sort of what they go through, and the tools that they have at their disposal. It's like Alex said, decisions don't get made on a whim. And I remember a couple of years ago, there was a suggestion that was one steward in particular had it in for Verstappen, and didn't Verstappen have to apologise or something like that? Max will now understand better firsthand how the decisions get made. And it would be good if drivers are very busy, they have a massively packed schedule, but they certainly spend a lot less time with us than we would like. And I'm sure that they've got room in their schedule to get them all together one day pre-season, first day of the season, wherever it is, and if they can't actually go out and experience it firsthand, bring the experience to them. Basically make them sit for a seminar or something like that, because it does bore me when drivers just hit out at officials. They lash out at the decision-making processes that they don't know anything about, and sometimes better to bite your tongue if you don't actually know what you're speaking about. I'm sure there's people watching this video that think maybe we could listen to our own advice there, but I think it would be beneficial if drivers were exposed to that process a little bit more.
So Max has got one more day of his public service still to serve. If you guys were in charge at the FAA, what would you make him do for day 2?
Oh, good question.
I would have him go to an F4 race that doesn't clash with Formula 1. So, we hear these things. He often got criticised, especially a few years ago, for those late moves in the braking zones that were considered dangerous and stuff like that. The whole argument about being that younger drivers will see that and they'll copy it. Well, let's have him see if there are actually consequences. Like, let's see a younger driver or a few drivers pulling off an over-ambitious move and it all goes terribly wrong. So I'd have him there to see that in action, and the stewards there, and I'd also have him sweep up the carbon fibre at the end, because that's just more of a community service thing.
Yeah, I like that suggestion. I do think putting him somewhere where he can actually have a meaningful impact as well, like his presence there is actually relevant. Going to a junior single-seater race is a very, very good sort of example of that. Just making him sweep up carbon fibre is a very good idea. I was about to suggest maybe he should speak to the drivers and sort of get a proper understanding and appreciation for sort of what young drivers are like and sort of how impressionable they are, but maybe that's the sort of thing that wouldn't rub off on him as well. Maybe they could be a bit more draconian with it and give him a broom or a dustpan and brush or something. That might be better.